There is a version of you that already has everything you've been reaching for. Not someday, not eventually. Right now, existing fully, breathing fully, living inside a frequency you haven't stepped into yet, but one that is as real as the chair beneath you. And here's what no one tells you. That version of you is not waiting passively, it's sending signals, constantly. The question that should keep you up tonight is not, when will my life change? The question is, why haven't you been listening? What if the reason your reality hasn't shifted yet has nothing to do with how hard you've been trying, and everything to do with the direction you've been sending your attention? Bashar has touched on something in his transmissions that most people absorb intellectually and then completely misapply in practice. He calls it quantum communication, the idea that your consciousness is not locked inside linear time, that the version of you living your desired reality exists in a parallel frequency right now, and that contact between you and that version is not only possible, it's already happening. You just haven't learned to recognize it as contact. Once you see this clearly, the entire practice of alignment stops being about effort and becomes about reception. If this is already landing somewhere in your chest, you found this for a reason. Channels don't reach people by accident. Frequencies find each other. Hit subscribe if you want to go deeper than the surface layer of these teachings. We don't summarize here. We excavate. Your future self is already talking. The only question is whether you're listening. Now let's build the foundation before we get to the practice. Because if you try to do this without understanding the mechanics, you'll turn it into another ritual that produces nothing. Bashar's cosmology rests on a principle that Western culture has almost no framework to hold. Time is not a river you're floating down. It is an ocean. Every possible version of your life, every timeline, every outcome, every expression of who you could be, exists simultaneously, right now, as distinct vibrational fields layered one on top of the other. What you experience as your life is simply the field you are currently tuned to, not the field you deserve, not the field you've earned through enough visualization, the field that matches the frequency you are actually, genuinely, moment to moment, broadcasting. Think about a radio. You don't earn the station. You don't manifest the station into existence through effort or hope or years of patient wanting. The station is already broadcasting. It has always been broadcasting. What changes is the frequency your dial is set to. When your dial shifts, even slightly, you stop receiving one signal and start receiving another. The music doesn't travel to you from somewhere far away. It was always there, woven into the air around you, waiting for your receiver to match it. Your desired reality operates identically, the version of your life where you are living in alignment, where your relationships feel easeful, where your work is an expression of your true nature. That version is broadcasting right now. It is not being built. It is not on its way. It is already complete, already transmitting, and the only reason you haven't tuned into it is that your current frequency, shaped by old beliefs, inherited fears, habitual emotional states, is still locked onto a different station. This is not about effort, it's about tuning. There is a second analogy that makes this even more precise, and it comes from the science of resonance. If you place two tuning forks in a room and you strike one of them, the other will begin to vibrate on its own. Not because they are physically connected, not because energy was sent from one to the other, but because resonance is a law, like frequencies activate each other across space. They call out to one another. They entrain. Your future self, the one living in the reality you want, is a tuning fork that has been struck. It is vibrating at a specific frequency right now, and every time you genuinely, embodiedly, shift into a state that matches that frequency, even for 30 seconds, you begin to vibrate in response. You don't attract that reality to you. You become sympathetically resonant with it. You tune. Your future self is already talking. The only question is whether you're listening. Now here is where most people, even deeply sincere seekers, make the mistake that keeps them circling the same ground for years. And I want to validate something before I name it, because this next part is not a criticism. It is an explanation. You've been doing the work. Genuinely. You've sat with the visualizations, you've done the scripting, you've caught your negative thoughts and redirected them. You've consumed thousands of hours of content like this one. in a sincere effort to understand how reality works. That dedication is not the problem. The sincerity is not the problem. The problem is subtle, and it is this. Most of what passes for communicating with your higher self or aligning with your future is actually the mind performing alignment for an audience of one. And that audience is the fear that nothing is working. When you visualize your future self, whose script are you following? Are you genuinely inhabiting a frequency, or are you crafting a very convincing mental movie while underneath it, quietly, the fear that it's not real is running the entire session? Bashar is precise about this in a way that can feel uncomfortable the first time you really let it in. He says, and I'm paraphrasing his transmission into plain language, that your higher self does not respond to your requests. It responds to your state. It does not hear the words of your affirmation. It recognizes the frequency of your being. These are not the same thing. A person can affirm abundance for an hour while broadcasting scarcity. The words are irrelevant. The field is everything. This is not about saying the right things, it's about becoming the right frequency. Think about a GPS system. When you enter a destination, the GPS does not consider how badly you want to get there. It does not reward you for how many times you've typed the address. It simply reads your current location and calculates the most direct path from where you actually are. If you lie to the GPS, if you enter a false starting point, it will give you directions that don't work. It will route you through roads that don't connect. This is precisely what happens when your stated intention doesn't match your actual, embodied, felt frequency. You're giving the quantum field a false starting coordinate, and then wondering why the directions feel off. For me, this clicked during a period when I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to do and feeling more stuck than ever. I remember realizing one afternoon that every time I visualized, there was this thin layer of performance to it, like I was trying to convince something. And Bashar's transmission came back to me. You cannot convince the field. You can only match it. That was the moment the practice stopped being an activity and started being a way of being. Your future self is already talking. The only question is whether you're listening. So what does actual quantum communication look like? And specifically, what does Bashar's framework suggest about doing this before sleep? Sleep is not incidental to this practice. It is central to it. Here is why. During the hypnagogic state, those liminal minutes as your body relaxes and ordinary waking consciousness begins to thin, the boundary between your current vibrational signature and adjacent frequencies becomes more permeable. Your ego's insistence on a fixed identity softens. The static of your habitual thought patterns quiets. And in that quiet, if you have prepared correctly, something real becomes possible. Genuine resonance with your future self's frequency. This is not visualization in the traditional sense. This is not scripting a movie and watching it behind your closed eyes. This is something more precise and more powerful. It begins not with imagery, but with a question. And the question is not, what do I want? The question is, what does it feel like to already be the person I'm becoming? Not what does it look like? What does it feel like? There is a difference between imagining yourself in a beautiful home and actually accessing the emotional frequency of someone who lives with that ease, that security, that quiet sense of belonging. The image is content. The feeling is the frequency. Bashar is unambiguous on this. What you are practicing is not visualization. You are practicing state induction. You are learning to inhabit a frequency as if it were already home. Here is the practical bridge, the one thing you can do tonight. Before you sleep, don't begin with imagery. Begin with your body. Lie still. Take 3 slow breaths, not for relaxation, but as a signal to your nervous system that you are shifting modes. Then ask yourself inwardly and without urgency, one question. If I were already living in complete alignment with my highest excitement, what would be the dominant feeling in my body right now? Not the details, not the circumstances. The feeling. Stay with whatever arises. Let it become physical. Let it settle into your chest, your hands, your breath. That feeling, that state, is your frequency. That is your signal. And in that state, your future self is not a concept you are reaching toward. It is a frequency you have become. Spend 5 minutes there. Just 5 minutes. Not performing it, not checking whether it's working, simply being it. This is what Bashar means by quantum communication, not sending a message but becoming the signal. Your future self is already talking. The only question is whether you're listening. Let's bring this full circle, because we opened with a version of you that already exists, fully formed, fully alive, broadcasting in a field you haven't yet inhabited. And maybe when you first heard that, there was a flicker of hope followed immediately by the familiar ache of distance, the sense that what you want is real but somehow just out of reach. I want to offer you a different relationship to that ache. That longing you feel, the pull toward a life that feels more alive, more true, more fully yours, is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of resonance. You cannot feel the pull of a frequency you have no connection to. The fact that you can imagine it, that you can feel the outline of it, that something in you recognizes it as real even when your circumstances haven't confirmed it yet, that is the tuning fork responding. That is your system already beginning to vibrate in sympathy with a signal that is real and present and broadcasting. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not someone who has failed at this despite years of trying. You are someone whose receiver has been pointed in a slightly wrong direction, not because of any flaw in you, but because no one taught you that the signal was already there, that it has always been there, that the version of you living fully in alignment is not a destination you reach. It is a frequency you choose, one felt moment at a time, beginning tonight in the quiet before sleep, when the noise thins and something true becomes audible. Your future self is already talking. Tonight before you sleep, become still enough to hear it. The life you want isn't coming, and it's waiting for you to tune in.